everyone. Thanks for coming. It's a pleasure to be here today. Let me introduce Veronica Rappoport, Second Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Argentina. We had an important meeting ahead of our summit in Buenos Aires, productive discussions, and we have made a lot of progress in many topics. On the global economy, we have discussed the outlook of the global economy that remains positive, and global growth projections remains steady. However, the expansion has become less even across economies, and some of the downside risks that have been discussed earlier in the year are starting to materialize. As monetary policy continues to normalize in advanced economy, financial conditions tighten in emerging ones, and several emerging economies have experienced market volatility. We have discussed how to mitigate current and potential risks and agreed that it is imperative to take action to ensure fundamentals are strong in order to face the challenges. On trade tensions, we agree that international trade is an important engine of growth, and we need to resolve tensions which can negatively affect market sentiment and increase financial volatility. We must strengthen cooperation and keep channels for constructive dialogue open. It remains important to further strengthen the cooperation among G-20 members to sustain global financial stability. We spoke about infrastructure for development, one of the priorities of the Argentinian G20, given its importance for economic prosperity, sustainable development, and inclusive growth. We have focused on how to further catalyze private sector investment into infrastructure by putting in place the necessary conditions for infrastructure to develop as an asset class. We have advanced in the implementation of the roadmap to infrastructure as an asset class, and we are working on concrete actions to improve project preparation, data, risk mitigation, and contractual standardization. We are also working with Japan, the next G20 presidency, to continue with this infrastructure priority. On the international financial architecture, we have discussed the 15th IMF General Review of Quotas. Members are committed to a strong quota-based and adequately resourced IMF at the center of the global financial safety net, and to finish the 15th Global Review of the Quota by the agreed deadline, no later than the IMF World Bank Group annual meetings of 2019. We have been making progress on dealing with debt vulnerabilities in low-income countries by promoting sustainable and transparent practices by borrowers and creditors, both official and private. Also, the Eminent Persons Group has presented its final recommendations at this meeting. This report gives us the opportunity to reflect 10 years after the onset of the global financial crisis on ways to improve the international financial architecture and make it more effective. On the compact with Africa, we were working on this important initiative designed to promote private investment in Africa, including in infrastructure. The engagement and interest among African countries to join has remained high, and there are already 12 African countries participating. At the same time, it is important to remember that this is a long-term initiative. So having said that, we open the room for questions.
Thank you very much. Enda Curran from Bloomberg News. Minister, could I ask you, you said there was an agreement for a need to resolve trade tensions. How tense are things on the trade front at the moment? And is there any evidence that those tensions are going to ease in the near to medium term? Thank you.
Well, the G20 provides a mechanism to seek consensus and strive collectively towards our shared goals. But even having this governance group working. We know that there are trade tensions, and we have to work together in solving them. I think that it's important to note that we had almost 1 month ago the ministerial meeting on trade and investment in Mar del Plata in Argentina. And as you know, the meeting was extremely successful since ministers agreed the first ministerial statement in over 2 years. So in that statement, they reaffirmed the importance of trade, and members agreed to work together to enhance sustainable economic growth, keep markets open, address economic development, and reinvigorate the international trading system.
Hello, I'm Thierry Augier from Global Markets. You mentioned the eminent persons report, the eminent persons group report. I would like to find out if it says in the report that the role of G20 should be reset to focus on building consensus on key political issues. Do you accept this? What do you think of this?
Well, that coincides exactly with what Argentina was focused since the beginning of its G20 presidency. We wanted to streamline the process, to reduce the size of the communiques, to reduce the range of the topics that are being treated, concentrating on global governance and the most important issues regarding that. I think that a lot of advances were done in this regard, and that coincides with the report of the Eminent Persons Group, who sees the G20 as the most important governance group that we have right now to solve the global problems. Of course, the report also treated other issues on how to improve the efficiency of the usage of the MDB's funds and other type of issues. It's a long report that is very useful and that was considered by the members.
Hi, Payung-sak from NHK. You have already mentioned about the concern about the trade war, but may I ask you once again that how member country express concern about the U.S.-China trade war and the U.S. protectionism policy? What kind of reaction do they have?
Of course, we recognize that we are right now facing trade tensions amongst members of the G20. So part of those tensions will have to be resolved by the members. The G20 can play a role in providing the ground for the discussion, but of course, the difference that still persists should be resolved by the members which are directly involved in the tensions.
Grace on Tara TV. As one of the representatives of emerging and developing countries, despite the limitations, how can Indonesia's involvement in the G20's benefit its people and the developing world in general? Thank you.
Well, I think that the G20 was originally born as a group on the onset of the Asian financial crisis in 97, 98. So first it was a group conformed by ministers of finance and governors of central banks that started to work on how to strengthen the global safety net, to strengthen the financial regulation, and it played a very useful role. On the onset of the financial crisis of 2008, the G20 was converted into a group led by the leaders that played a crucial role in avoiding that the financial crisis of 08, 09 was deeper So basically, it is important to maintain the functioning of the G20. So in case of necessity, like the role played in 08, 09, in that period, the role of the G20 was crucial in avoiding the resurgence of protectionism as a way to resolve the crisis. And rather than that, to put an important role in the IMF and in resolving the global imbalances. And in the good times, the G20 is having an important role in leading a permanent agenda, for example, on taxation, in which, in the work coordinated by the OECD, we are solving a lot of problems in terms of the risks that digitalization is posing to taxation, or to avoiding BEPS and tax evasion through the mechanisms of exchange of information coordinated by the OECD under the umbrella of the G20. Also, the G20 right now is taking care of very pressing issues like how to regulate cryptocurrencies. We are working in issues also related to money laundering, to strengthening the global financial system. So I think that there's a role in the times of the crisis in which the G20 proved to be crucial, and there's a permanent role in the good times also addressing the day-to-day issues in which the G20 is reaching advances.
Thank you. Michael Igo with DevX. I have a question related to the focus on infrastructure for development. We've heard from officials in the US government that they're pushing through the G20 to try to build some consensus around what sustainable development finance looks like, or good development finance, sort of in response to what they consider to be some unsustainable examples of development finance. Can you share any update on those discussions, if indeed they are happening? And do you expect that some agreement on principles around sustainable development finance might be a product of the G20 summit? Thank you.
Well, infrastructure for growth was one of the two priorities of the finance track in our G20. The other one was the future of work. So on the deliverables that we were seeking when we put the issue of infrastructure and in our G20 was to try to recreate or to create a new asset class, which is infrastructure financing, as it were the global bonds for emerging markets in the 90s. So as to try to cover the gap between the infrastructure needs that the world has and financing to infrastructure that right now is channeled. So we are accumulating a deficit in infrastructure, not only in emerging market economies, but also in the developed world. So in our view, we made concrete steps towards building infrastructure as an asset class. We developed a roadmap of 7 steps so as to complete this process of having infrastructure as an asset class. It will be the task for Japan to finish this process. And after that, we think that we will have done a major step in terms of putting together the enormous liquidity that the financial sector has with the large deficit in infrastructure that most of the countries in the world are facing.
Last question.
Thank you for taking my questions. I'm now Aoyama from the Asahi Shimbun, Japan's newspaper. Although it may be a little bit premature to talk about this, but what roles would you expect Japan, the next host country of the G20, to play going forward, especially in order to safeguard the global trading system?
Well, of course, Japan will have to continue with the agenda of the G20, but also Japan also will be focused on their own priorities. And we already know that quality infrastructure is one of the priorities of Japan. So we are very happy that the issue of infrastructure, which is so demanding right now, will continue under Japan's presidency. Thanks. Well, the priorities of Japan will be defined by Japan. So, of course, it's a key issue right now in the global discussion, but as Argentina decided its priorities under its G20, Japan will be the one deciding on its priorities. Thanks a lot.